You totally, definitely freak. And is it cheating if I just put Faker in at every role? Sure, that's what everyone wants to do. Now, the midseason invitational begins tomorrow, and I'm joined here by a panel of experts to break down the teams from their respective regions as we size up the competition. First up, we have OGN caster William Chobra Cho from Korea. Next is Garena caster Clement joining us from Taipei. Julian Pastry Time Carr, who not only called the LPL all season long, but who also covered the entire international wildcard tournament. And joining for the first time on PTL, we have Devin Pyrotechnics Young from the European LCS. While holding down the local four is, of course, Joshua Jatleesman. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us here on the show.
Right on, man. All
right, guys, the first thing I need to do for you is to give me a breakdown of each of the team's biggest strengths and most glaring weaknesses in a segment we're going to call Pros and Cons. Jat, we'll start with you and Team Solo Mid. Tell me what their biggest strengths and weaknesses are. You've got 1 minute. Hit.
1 whole minute. I mean, I think it's in the name for Team Solo Mid as far as the pros. It's the mid lane, but mainly in how they support that lane as well, because it's not just jungle ganks that come there. It's also Lustboy, who roams up frequently. I think Bjergsen and the way they support the mid lane carry style is the biggest strength of Team Solo Mid. I put Wild Turtle as a secondary carry, and while people like to knock on his positioning, I think that's a problem of the past. I think recently his positioning has gotten substantially better, so he's a guy who will maximize his damage in most team fights, which is what any good AD carry should do. I think the cons of Team Solo Mid, though, is Dyrus. He's a bit of a liability in some games. For one, because when he is left on an island, he doesn't play as safe as he needs to. He greeds for a lot of CS, and I think if a team can really put down Dyrus, they can quickly turn the game into a 4v5 or try and snowball their top lane jungle synergy into a victory. I think when we've seen Team Solo Mid falter this year, that's been one of the main reasons. Or if Team Solo Mid tries something a little bit too crazy because they want to show they're diverse instead of just going with what they're best at, which is the mid lane.
Pays your time. Same question. Edward Gaming's biggest strength and most glaring weaknesses. You're on the clock.
I mean, it's funny that we come just after TSM because EDG are almost a supercharged TSM with Pawn in the mid lane and Deft down the bottom for carries. Instead of having one carry though, EDG have two, and when either Deft or Pawn or God forbid both manage to go off, the games get taken over pretty quickly. As far as cons go, it's actually their best performing player, Clearlove, that's their biggest strength and biggest weakness. If he has a great game, look for him to take over and completely carry games on his own without the use of his massive carries, but when he falls behind, when he's not on a playmaking jungler, when he's playing too passively, his team falls apart completely.
All right, Chobra, now looking at you, it's SKT time. Go.
Well, it's pretty hard to go with both pros and cons for a team like SK Telecom T1. But let's start with the pros, right? They have some of the best players in all positions. It's not just the Faker show anymore. We've seen Bang completely carry games. Marin has finally stood up to that reputation he's had. And of course, both junglers, Bengi and Tom, and EasyHoon in the finals of the LCK. But here's the kicker for SKT is that usually when teams have like the best laners, their team fights are just maybe passable, or they're not exactly the most aggressive team once it comes to the mid and late game. But no matter which roster they use, if it's Faker and Bengi, Faker's the one taking those big risks, initiating those fights. If it's Tom and EasyHoon, Tom will just go in on that Sejuani or other junglers that he wishes to choose and start just ridiculous team fights, and then the rest of his teammates will carry through with their mechanics. I mean, that's pretty unbeatable in my opinion. However, their cons, if we had to list any, I do think Wolf is their weakest link. Wolf just hasn't really shown up to be that he's the superstar of the team, the superstar support in Korea. And oftentimes recently in their matches, Wolf has admitted himself that, oh, you know, I thought we were going to give a comeback to the other team because I got caught out. So maybe if they clean that up, they really will be that perfect SKT once again.
Sounds good. All right, Clement, you've been covering the AHQ all year. What are the strengths and weaknesses of the surprise LMS champs?
Well, I think that AHQ is one of the best brawler teams we have right now. They have a really unique team fighting style, and because of this patch, their front lines aren't that easy to kill, so they can go on you anytime they want. Another pro they have is that their bot lane, Anne, has been super dominant this season. 84% kill participation in this playoff match, incredibly good. But when you look at the cons of AHQ, they said that this themselves, they're a bit over-aggressive. They're not as patient as they can be. They average a lot of kills in games, and they're really good in dragon fights. But a lot of these times, if a team is patient and smart, they can punish AHQ for this over-aggression.
All right, and Pastry and pulling the reverse card, we're going to hit back to you before we hit Europe to talk about Besiktas. Do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Besiktas, the biggest strength is definitely their early game aggression. When they got ahead in a game, whether it was through objectives or kills, they were able to snowball very effectively, and they fight well together when they're ahead. The biggest weakness, of course, comes at the same cost, as if they can't get ahead in the early game, they'll struggle to play from behind and close out a game when they don't have a lead already.
All right, and Pyra, let's hear about Fnatic.
All right, well, Riv, Fnatic is a team. Obviously, many associate the brand with some serious victories, but this is a whole brand new roster coming in, minus Yellowstar, of course. We've got 4 new players in the team, and they have done absolutely fantastic. Biggest strength for this team, though, is just how surprisingly well they've been able to fight together, how well coordinated they are as a team. They know each of their roles. Huni goes in, Febivin is able to secure kills in the back, Yellowstar roams around, Steelback just pumping out damage constantly, and of course Reignover securing the vision and setting up the plays for the team. So all these things really come together to work well for Fnatic, but their weakness, obviously, very untested roster outside of the European LCS. We'll have to see how they do at MSI, but a lot of these guys very, very new to the big stage, and they've definitely had some ups and downs bouncing around a little bit. We've seen that their one-dimensional style has kind of bothered them in the past, and they haven't been able to overcome it all the time.
All right, gentlemen, thank you for the breakdowns, but I do want to dig a little deeper because the teams at MSI are made up of the best players from their regions, and that means different play styles and strategies from around the world are going to be clashing in the lane. So let's take a look at the roles for a sneak peek at what to expect this week. First up, we're going to have to go to the top lane. What do we expect these players to bring on a lonely island? There's been a lot of meta shifts and a lot of looking at the top laners for this. Trobra, we'll start with you.
Well, all right, top lane, I think we look at Marin, and I think he really understands how to play that top lane right now. What really interests me for Marin is that when he debuted, he used to be hailed as the faker of the top lane. He was going to play all these carry top laners. Of course, we didn't see that happen given the meta and the style of T1S at the time, but now he doesn't need to do that. He's still playing all these tank top laners that are popular in the current meta, and he's also bringing back champions like Gnar and making it work and still holding that carry potential to just ruin teamfights for the enemy team. Marin, at the same time, his teleport timings have been excellent. They've really improved to match the top teleporters of the world. I think he's really had it all. He has the 1v1 mechanics in lane, he can teleport when he needs to, and then come teamfight, he knows when to go in and completely cause chaos.
All right, and Pyro, looking at you, what do we expect for Fnatic to bring out of that top lane?
Oh, well, everybody's been chanting Huni's name for a reason all season, Riv, and it's just awesome the way that we've seen him play. And really similar to the way Chober's talking about Marin there, is it just is a huge amount of impact. And, he's able to teleport exactly when his team needs him to, but the champion choices are really what sets him apart. That Hecarim, when he started bringing that out, he just absolutely decimated the rest of Europe with it. Yes, he's been a little bit shaky on some of the other choices, Shyvana, Lee Sin, didn't quite work out with that top smite, but he has been absolutely fantastic. And there's a reason we gave this guy Rookie of the Year. He's 100% earned it.
All right, chat, we're going to jump over to NA, taking a look at that top lane. You spoke a little bit about it before.
Yeah, I mean, Darius is not the same star power as a Marin, Koro, or Huni because Darius brings a different aspect to the game. Like I said, I think it's potentially one of TSM's weaknesses because they do not focus priority on him, and he does have a tendency to die a fair bit when he's left on his own. I just kind of want to bounce off some of what the other people have said because Gnar, to me, in the top lane at this MSI is going to be super exciting. Marin, particularly in the Korean finals, played it into the Aurelia matchup, and for pretty much the first time was able to either win or go even in that matchup. I really liked the Mercury Treads plus Warden's Mail build to neutralize Aurelia, but the Gnar matchup between Marin and Koro, and Pastry, I kind of want to get your opinion on this. Like, who is the better Gnar between those two guys? Because Koro is, what, like 18-1 with it?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, he got defeated in the finally on his Gnar, but I'm still going to put Koro as the best Gnar in the world. I think mechanically that 1v1 in a top lane, he's not as good maybe as really just putting people down in a lane and bullying them. But Koro's one of the best team fighters in the world, and it shows in the way he teleports, and it shows in how he fights. He can carry games, he can probably carry them on Teemo, let's be honest, and team fight with him. But when you give a guy a high impact champion like Gnar, he goes off. Like, he tried really hard to carry losing games on Gnar and couldn't do it because Klilov just didn't have a high impact jungler. He was playing Nunu, I'm pretty sure. But you want to talk about team fighting Gnars? I think Koro for me is hands down the best in the world.
All right, Clement, I want to jump to you now. HQ Esports Club with a big surge at the end of the split. Was a lot of that from the top lane? How much can be credited there?
Of course, man. Ziv has really improved on his champion pool, and most important of all, he has had great teleports this playoffs. But unfortunately, he also had to go through 12 days of military service right before MSI, so we're not sure if he's still up to shape. But I have to say he has had the best damage share out of any top laner in the LMS, and he does play these tanky top laners, as well as the carry top laners like Vladimir and even Kennen.
All right, pace your time. Covering the International Wildcard Tournament, I kind of want to gauge you on Besiktas top laner. Is they going to have what it takes to really come into the MSI strong?
Thaldren's an interesting player, actually, from Besiktas. He's really strong, and it was actually their carry for their team. During the group stages of the tournament, he didn't perform as well as we might have expected, but he came up massive in the finals. And it's funny that we talk about tank players and we talk about carry top laners who don't really exist anymore. Thaldren's still classically a carry top laner. Look for the Hecarim for sure. Probably a little less of the Nar Maokai action going on. And if he plays his Riven, he didn't play it in the tournament, but it's his favorite champion, and that's a big carry he could pull out as well. Obviously, the team comes in probably as an underdog, but Thaldren can certainly look to upset some people, especially if he plays something nice and fancy like Riven.
Well, we heard what Caster June said in the video. These players are going to have to do abilities that they don't even know they have to bring the win out here. Now let's move on to the jungle. And keep in mind that MSI will be played on the 5.7 patch. Will these guys be laughing all the way to the gank?
I mean, that's the thing about this patch that's interesting, is that when you're playing with a bunch of support junglers with an item like Cinderhulk that's just so cost effective, you don't really lose very much by being aggressive with your resources. Like, it's seriously, if you get into the enemy jungle and get an experience lead, the thing that matters most in something like Sejuani Gragas as a matchup is levels. It's not items, it's levels. You need your ultimates.
Yeah.
So if you go in and like get ahead of the enemy jungler, you're miles ahead if you're a level half ahead. But even if you go in and it doesn't work, you still have the option of farming up the rest of your jungle and then coming back when you do have your ultimate.
All right, and Clement with AHQ obviously surging at the end. What are your thoughts on with this Cinderhulk meta jungle coming in? Has AHQ been strong in this fashion, and will they be able to compete at MSI?
Yeah, I just want to echo a lot of what the others said right now, is that if you are an aggressive jungler, then this is the patch for you. And that has been the case with Mountain. When we did the statistics, he actually took 30% of the enemy's jungle when he was playing Gragas. And he also had the highest KDA in the playoffs at 13 or KDA. Really high, really aggressive player, really hard to kill. And he also has this really aggressive mentality where he's always trying to run into your team. And like everyone has said, it's really hard to punish because the junglers right now are very hard to kill. Of course, the 5.7 patch has kind of nerfed this down a little bit, so we're really waiting to see if Mountain can keep this up for HQ.
All right, and Pyra, there's a lot of talk of aggression, a lot of talk of taking the fights and engaging. That's something Reignover loves to do. You think Fnatic's going to be able to bring it in with the jungle at MSI?
Oh, absolutely. Reignover has been an absolute beast for his team in terms of trying to get not just the fights rolling, getting a lot of the early vision up. One big trick that he does that really no one else in Europe seems to have any answer for is he always roams down to the bottom, takes a scuttle crab early, just goes through the jungle. You know, he doesn't always take the jungle, he doesn't always counter, but he kind of leaves no trace. The guy's sort of like a ninja that way. And in the same sense, you know, with all these really strong players on the team, people don't talk about Reignover as much, but he's an integral part of the team. He's always setting up these fights, and he makes big plays for them. So, while you may not hear as much people singing his praises, you definitely see his impact on Fnatic.
It's very interesting how some of the junglers can work behind the curtain. Now, moving forward, we definitely have to take a look at what a lot of the community in general and almost every tournament says. It's coming down to the mid lane, gentlemen. With players that have assembled in Florida for MSI now, I expect there to be some epic clashes in that lane. Pyra, when these guys go head-to-head, who's going to come out on top?
That is obviously a pretty tough call for a lot of mid laners, but everyone has one name on their mind. Of course, it's always going to be Faker. You know, I mean, they didn't really need him for the finals that SKT did, so it's going to be hard to call for the rest of the teams, but I think he's definitely got the edge there. But we might see some EasyHoon action. I don't want to take all of Chover's points, so I'll let him discuss that.
Well, I mean, I think it's the main point that we all have to talk about, right? Is like, who's it going to be, EasyHoon or Faker? Because I'll let you go in a second, Chover. Like, I'm wondering at this point whether EasyHoon is a better fit for that team than Faker when Tom is in specifically.
Of course.
Tom is like such an aggressive jungler when he's on, like his feast or famine style. If he makes an initiation, you almost want a mid laner who is less susceptible to ganks because he's not going for as many big plays. But then we saw EasyHoon get 2 solo kills in the finals. Like at this point, when they use him to win the championship 3-0, I'm wondering how much EasyHoon we're going to be seeing at MSI.
Yeah, so I might get a lot of hate for this, but I'm going to put it out there. I think it's And all right, and there's actually a small community in Korea too, within like the larger League of Legends community that believes this, is that we might be seeing a time here where EasyHoon actually is rising as the best mid laner. And I know it's just blasphemous.
I think
no
that's
one can believe
reasonable.
That.
I think it's reasonable.
But I think it's reasonable because, like you said, Jat, EasyHoon, like he was never a bad mid laner, but the problem was that he was too passive. He was safe. He would get you the win if you went to 50 minutes, right? He would get you the win if he could play Ziggs and farm all the lanes for the 30 minutes starting at the 20-minute mark. But suddenly yesterday we see him going for those tower dives. We see him flashing in lane for a 1v1 kill against Kuro. I mean, this is, like Doa said in his cast, who is this guy? I mean, this is not something we'd ever expect from EasyHoon. And I do think actually it pays off better because we've seen this time and time again, even since Season 1 and Season 2, where we have these risk takers in mid lane and they'll be the superstar, but oftentimes they'll also be the bane of their own team. I mean, I think about, for instance, Reginald when he was playing for TSM. He was the superstar of the team, but sometimes his risk wouldn't really pay off for TSM as a whole. We're seeing that a little bit with Faker these days, where he's still going off, and sure, his mechanics still hold him up, but does it really pay off for the rest of the team? It works when Bengi's in there, because Bengi is generally much more of just a macro jungler. But when Tom's in, I totally agree with you, Jad. I think EasyHoon really just rounds out the team better. And when he needs to take advantage of the lane 1v1, he'll do it. So I'm actually favoring EasyHoon as the better mid laner and strategically better for SKT. However, you know, maybe Koma will go for some fan service and let that Faker versus Bjergsen happen.
Yeah.
It's going to be very interesting. I got to definitely touch on with Pastry here because you still have a world champion in Pawn in that mid lane who took another team to first place in the region. Pastry, what's the power like coming out of the LPL?
Pawn's not bad at League of Legends. No, he's really, really good.
He's all right.
Like, apart from the Super Goku like Game 5 story versus World Elite where he came out and like hard carried a game on Kassadin, Pawn's ridiculous. Like, Pawn is mechanically amazing. He loves to 1v1 people. Fantastic team fighter. Can play just about any champion. And for me, for all of the superlatives I can throw at Pawn, his biggest trait for me is his flexibility. He is liquid in that mid lane. He will play anything you want. If it's an AD, he'll play it. If it's a support, he'll play it. If you need a Twisted Fate, he's in there. If you need an assassin, he's in there. His LeBlanc draws bans constantly and for good reason. His Lulu's great. His Twisted Fate's great. His just about everything's great. He still plays Fizz because he's crazy. Like, Pawn's insanely good. He's probably the best looking player in the LPL. Not the best performing. I think Clearlove or Def probably holds that right at the end of the season. But he's the strongest looking player from China, and that is a scary thing to say about any player.
Yeah, and don't forget, he did regularly beat Faker in.
Yeah, I mean, that could be fun. Maybe just some revenge, right?
Yeah, that's one thing I kind of wanted to touch on, because if we looked at Pawn's alliance next time, is like when Pawn played at Worlds last year, he wasn't expected to be like this Faker level player. He was like, oh yeah, he's an okay mid laner. Then he started playing Assassins. I think he's really come into his own in the split in the LPL, and he's kind of ascended, which might be what we're seeing from EasyHoon right now. But I do need to talk about Bjergsen specifically because I have some regional stats that I kind of want to bring up. Bjergsen dominated North America more than any other mid laner dominated their own region of the major regions we've seen here. He averaged a 1,000 gold advantage over his opponent at 20 minutes during the regular season. There was one game in the entire regular season where he did not have a gold advantage on the opponent mid laner at 20 minutes, and that was a 10 gold disadvantage. Like, Bjergsen has been so head and shoulders above everyone else in North America, and he does have, whether it's a small sample size or not, a lot of international experience, some victorious. You know, he's been to Worlds last year. He experienced that. He then won IM Katowice, and this is TSM's moment to kind of shine, and he is the centerpiece of that team. So that's another big-time mid laner we have to keep our eyes on.
Yeah, I have to agree, Jet. Bjergsen is not only one of the best domestic players, that's been true for a while, both in Europe when he played and in North America now in his current home, but even internationally, the guy's an absolute beast. I expect this guy to take a mid lane against almost anyone and just feel comfortable. Look, he's so good.
Yeah, I definitely hold Bjergsen at high regard, but I'm also interested. I mean, ever since we heard his name and finally that he was going to play professionally in AHQ, Westor. I mean, he's kind of been this myth, and then he never really showed up on an international stage. So I'm wondering, how is he looking now, Clement? I mean, can we expect kind of the myth of Westor to come back at the MSI stage?
Well, I think he hit a slump this season just because, thanks, Rito, you nerfed a lot of his assassin champions, but he is coming back in the meta just because he's been able to play a lot of these protection mid laners for his carry Anne. Picks like Karthus with his Rylai's and picks like TF. He's been back on his Season 2 champions, which are treating him really good. And also to note, he's in top shape. He's currently rank 1 and rank 2 on the Taiwanese servers, so I do expect him to play well. But also, he hasn't been doing that well in terms of a one-on-one lane perspective. In the playoffs, he hasn't really been able to hold his own against Maple from Flash Wolves. So I really see AHQ and Westdoor shaping into like a secondary focus on AHQ. They really want to put more of their resources onto Anne, who is their main carry currently.
Hopefully that works out for them. It does seem like Westdoor is a little shadowed by all the other bigger mid laners right now, so maybe he can fly under the radar as a dark horse and kind of squeak by with the team. Obviously, we still have Febiven from Europe, Pyrotechnics. He's kind of a new love for Europe over there. Really strong mid laner coming out. How's he going to fare against the rest of this competition at MSI?
Well, I'm not going to lie to you, Riv. He's definitely a little bit more rough around the edges than some of our other more established talents in those regions, but he's still a very, very strong player. He loves his very high mechanical, high skill shot kind of champions. Obviously, we saw Xerath, and everyone was making the jokes on Twitter about how he was scripting it up. Just so many ultimates he was able to knock down. But obviously, those days are kind of come and gone. You know, he hasn't really been playing that kind of thing. In the finals, he played, Twisted Fate, he played Ahri, he played Kassadin. He had some mixed success on that. So it's kind of hard to see where he's going to stack up with the rest of these, star-studded mid laners. But you can bet he'll be a big part of Fnatic's strategy to just make sure he cleans up the kills constantly. You can expect his KDA to soar through the roof.
All right, gentlemen. Now, as we move down the list, a position that can sometimes carry a game on their back or with the wrong position cost the team their game. We've seen a lot of diversity in the AD carry role across the globe this year. Which AD carry do you think has the edge at MSI? Pastry, you've been covering the land of AD carries all spring long. Let's start with you.
Yeah, China, of course, known as the land of AD carries for a while. Put in some Korean players, and as it turns out, the Koreans are still really good as well. Deft, not only did he miraculously win his team the Game 5 against LGD. He beat Imp, by the way, to do that. Another decent Korean AD carry that now plays in China. Deft's an incredible player. Like, he was maybe quiet as far as players go just because Clearlove was playing surprisingly well and Pawn was just styling all over people in their wins. But Deft has been consistent. He's won many an MVP award as a result for his play. And he's kind of turned from, your quiet little AD carry that was really good at team fights in the late game to an incredible laner with his new support Mako. He can get solo kills. He can do lane swaps. He can kill people in the mid game and carry games there. He can go to late on Jinx and Kog'Maw and still win. Deft's one of the best players in the world. And I expect him to really want to prove that on a big stage like MSI.
Definitely crazy stuff to see. Looking out of North America, Jat, what do we expect?
Yeah, I mean, Wild Turtle, I don't think he's on Deft's level right now. I think Wild Turtle is actually underrated. Deft is probably the best AD carry at MSI. And Wild Turtle is a team fight AD carry because of how much roaming happens in the laning phase from Lustboy, and because so much of the jungle attention is often prioritized to either the enemy jungler or the mid lane. Wild Turtle actually has to play a somewhat safe laning phase. He's actually down in CS fairly frequently in lane, but he will pretty much always come back in the team fight. So that's kind of where I see Wild Turtle sitting in there. It's almost like if I look at all the AD carries here, I think Deft is the best. I think Bang is maybe a little overhyped because of that Game 4 he had against CJ. I think Turtle is potentially a little underrated, but still not at Deft's level. I think Steelback is a passive AD carry who is a team fighter, probably one of the weakest laners. I think Ann is good, not on a great team. I'm taking everyone's points. I'm so sorry. You guys can go in depth later. And I think Nardius is in over his head. It's not his fault. These are the best AD carries in the world.
I actually wanted to touch on Ann with you, Clement. You just said he's the one who's really making plays for this team. Why is it that their AD carry can do so much on AHQ?
I don't think a lot of people know this, but Ann has been a top 10 Korean challenger player for a lot of this season. And in terms of laning, he's one of the most dominant laners we've ever had. He has the fastest AD carry to reach 100 CS. He also keeps his opponents from reaching 100 CS around 1 minute earlier. So he's really lane dominant, which is something I don't think Deft has. Also, this new HQ does focus a lot on Ann. If you look at his regular season stats, he rarely had many multi-kills, but in terms of the playoffs, he actually had 4 quadra kills and 1 penta kill. During the stage against TPA, you could actually hear Chowie shouting that, "Oh my god, we can't kill Ann," because he's being protected too well. He also has a really wide champion pool. He plays all the champions, Lucian, Jinx, even Sivir, more of the teamfight-oriented style. Great positioning. he can be kind of like iffy-ish sometimes. We say that he's the AD carry that we most often see dead when we come back from a replay. So sometimes he goes into places where he doesn't really want to be, but in terms of team fighting and in terms of laning, I think he might surprise a lot of people as the best AD carry this MSI.
All right, guys, and moving down the list one more time. Everybody's favorite role and the role to fill. It is going to be support, sometimes the one to win the lane for the AD carry as they farm away. We have the other half of that duo lane. Clement, what supports do you feel are the best at MSI?
I actually want to put my vote up for Lustboy. I think he's been having an amazing season. If you look at the IEM, I think his Lulu was just jaw-breaking. His exhaust timings, his teamfight uses of ultimates, they're all good. And in terms of that C9 series, I think if you look at the game one, even though they lost that game, that flash into that three-man bubble really secured them a huge early game lead. But I also have to talk about my own region, which is Albus. He is new to the role, but he has been doing a great job on warding. I think he might have broken some sort of record when he placed 102 wards in a single game against TPA.
That'll do. Also watching his Nautilus bottom lane with Ann getting all those kills is awesome to see. Gentlemen, as we move on, who wants to take it next?
Oh, I'll grab this one. I got to put my stake in the ground here, Riv, because Yellowstar is an absolutely fantastic support. Everybody knows that. There's this guy, he's gotten 4 titles in the European LCS. He has been around forever, and it's not just his mechanical prowess that people talk about. It is absolutely his ability to lead this team. He's built this one up from the ground, well, with their coach, of course, Daler. But, you know, his style of calling, his style of play, roaming around the map, setting up early picks. I mean, this is what Fnatic thrives on. They take the game, they throw it into a state of chaos, and then they just come out on top, able to skirmish, able to fight over and over and over again. And you can see it in some of these high-engaged champs. His Leona made a big comeback during the season, and you could see just how deadly it was.
Definitely a personal feat for him.
Yeah, Yellowstar's Leona, I think, is something that everyone will always remember. If you've seen it once, that kind of is what inspires users around the world to be like, oh, I want to play Leona too. You can make some really big plays. I want to agree with Clement, though, mostly on that. I do hold Lustboy at the top for supports at MSI, and it's not just his Lulu, but the fact that he can play these common initiator supports like Thresh to a highly acceptable level, but then he can do the same plays with the more passive supports like Nami and Lulu, and even Janna sometimes. That's what really impresses me about Lustboy. I also want to kind of raise up Maiko and talk to Pastry Time a little bit about him, because I do think that him and Deft as a combo have really brought out the best of each other. And I know, and I'm coming from LCK, but as I said, I do think Wolf is the weakest link of SKT, and it's not that he's a bad support, it's just that I don't really think he necessarily shines in any part of playing a support, more so than some of these other players coming from other regions.
I'm sorry to disappoint you, Chobra. I was also going to say Lustboy.
What about
No, Mako's really good
Miko,
as well.
yeah.
I joke. Lustboy's excellent, but Mako is, for a rookie support playing in a region that was once upon a time with their AD carries known for support players, Mako's just been unbelievable. Mouse looked great in the early weeks of the LPL playing with Deft, and was kind of only playing Annie. Mako comes along and suddenly playing Annie. I'm like, okay, so they just have only Annie players on their roster. That's fine. And then it turns out he can play just about everything else as well. Mako, for me, I don't know. I feel like I haven't seen him have to play to his full potential yet. His Annie draws bans because it's that good and they're that scared of it. But I feel like everyone else is scared of the rest of EDG, that Mako just kind of does his job quietly and that's all okay. I think if you put Mako in a spot where he has to play make, whether or not he can do it's my big test. And I think he can, because I've seen him go massive in some games. But that's a big question. What happens when you apply true pressure to a support like Mako, who honestly at this point for a rookie, now on a championship winning team, feels probably mostly untested?
Well, no better to be tested than the mini worlds that people are calling MSI here as we come up to it. We've hit up the teams now and gone roll by roll through the rosters, gentlemen. So let's go down the line and get your predictions. Who will win MSI and why? Chobra, you're in the hot seat.
I mean, SK Telecom T1 just got to go with what I believe is the best team in the world right now. And it's because, as we talked, again, sorry for Wolf. I hope Wolf's not watching PTL right now, but sorry for Wolf. But aside from Wolf, all of us have mentioned every one of their players in all of the lanes, whether it's Tom or Bengi, whether it's Faker or EasyHoon. I mean, Bang, sure, he's a little bit quieter, but we've talked about him and his game 4 against CJ. And then there's Marin, who, as the captain of the team, I think has really grown into his own. So with that said, I think they're, again, just so well-rounded like they used to be in their prime when they won Worlds. So I think SK Telecom T1 is coming back to prove once again, hey, we're back in the spotlight. We're going to take MSI, and then we're going to cruise through Worlds.
All right, pace your time. Who do you choose?
TSM. No, EDG. Sorry. I mean, yeah, I have to pick EDG. No, I mean, SKT1 are very good, but I'll echo what Chobra said and just throw it back to EDG. They feel like a well-rounded team. They've got good veterans on it as well, and they arguably outperform every one of their lane compatriots in some element. Maybe not exactly in the lanes. I think for Deft and Pawn, I can say that, but for Koro, he at least outperforms most people when it comes to team fights. And Clearlove, it's all about Clearlove, man. If Clearlove shows up to a big international tournament with his 4+ years of competitive league experience, it'll be tough for EDG to lose a game. But Clearlove has carried them in games, and he has really fallen apart in some of their games. So he's the big worry for me, especially with junglers as aggressive as Tom, and even the likes of Santorin lurking there as well.
All right, Pacer, thank you. Clement, you're up to bat.
Well, I have to put my vote up for the Korean finals again. I think SKT1 is going to take this. Just based off of scrim knowledge, you know, AHQ could take games off of EDG, but I don't think they could even get a scrim with SKT1. SKT1 is just like, man, we're not scrimming you guys. So I just think that because they have such high pressure, like, from their laners, like, if they put Faker on, he's going to draw a lot of attention, and the crowd's going to get behind them. And also they have this variability where they can place different junglers, they can place different mids, and they also have a lot of styles to play with. I just don't really see any team just taking SKT1 off. This is their tournament for sure.
All right, sounds good. Pyra, pick it.
All right, Riv. Well, it was a much easier decision to make before we saw the finals where SKT, you know, just took that big 3-0, and they did it, of course, without Faker and without Bengi. But they look like a very strong team all around. They have a lot of different dynamics that they can go with. They have a very, very hard to call out and hard to prepare for style. But I still am going to give this one to Edward Gaming. They've been a consistent rock in their region. They've been at the top level all the way through the split. I don't see that changing anytime soon, and I don't see it changing for MSI. So I'm going to give this one to the boys from Edward Gaming.
All right, and Jat, I will let you have the last word.
Oh boy, can I do percentages just so I'm not just saying one team, because I think it's somewhat competitive. I'm going to make as many regional enemies as possible right here. I give Korea a 40% chance of winning with SKT because I do think they're the favorites overall. If I go down the line, I need to remember my percentages. I give TSM and EDG the same chance, probably about 20-25% chance of winning. I think EDG, the points Pacer Time brought out, but I think TSM, I am kind of Itza should not be overlooked. The fact that they dismantled CJ Entis, the fact that GE Tigers went there and were destroyed by Team WE, who then went back to China and was better, but still not the best. So I think there's a lot of stuff there. I think Europe is a little over-aggressive. They still need a little bit more time. I give them the next most percentage at like 10. And then I look at AHQ and the international wildcard team. I don't know what I have left, but like 5% and 1 for those guys.
And
Someone on Reddit, please check Jat's math. I really want to know if he's wrong. That's all
Definitely not, because I didn't have
torque.
any room for the 1. But there we go.
All right, thank you so much, gentlemen. We'll find out who was right over the next 4 days. It was a pleasure to have you all here, and we'll talk to you again very soon.